Hey guys, Tisha here, and we are back for the final reading of Counting the Cost. I'm excited that it's coming to an end, not because I didn't enjoy this book. I think that Jill did a very good job of letting us know some of her feelings without totally being ostracized from her family. But I'm looking forward to hearing what another one of the Duggars have to say. So we will be reading Becoming Free Indeed next. That's Ginger's book. And following that book, depending on when it gets here, we'll be reading 50 Years in Polygamy by Kristen Decker. And that is the aunt of Christine Brown. I know several of you had mentioned that as another book to look into, especially because she had a different side of polygamy, and she also seems to have helped out many young ladies to escape, and gentlemen as well. So I want to see what her book is about. But let's get back on topic and read what is left of Counting the Cost. A photo. Just be careful, Jill. I sat, exhaled slowly, and let my mind drift to the baby that was bursting to get out of my belly, and the birth that my calendar told me was likely still a month away. I hope this girl is not about to give birth in a traumatic way yet again. Instinct told me to block out the voice of the person talking to me, to ignore it and discount their warnings, but I didn't want to. I wanted to hear what they had to say. It wasn't a midwife I was talking with, or an OBGYN, and we weren't in a hospital room or a medical office. Okay. We were in a coffee shop. The person sitting opposite, offering me advice, was an old friend from back in the days when Sweet Jilly Muffin thought that Mr. Gothard could do no wrong. All I'm saying, my friend paused, searching for the words. Maybe she thought I was a minefield. One wrong word and I'd take us both out. But I wasn't on edge, and I wasn't feeling too triggered. Make sure I didn't skip something. Oh, I did. By this long discussion about my family, it was okay, and I tried to communicate that with my smile. All I'm saying, Jill, is don't go throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I owe a lot to your parents. They're good people. I know. Ever since we started talking publicly about our decision to put a little distance between us and the family, this kind of conversation was a regular feature in my life. I must have had it 20 other times with 20 different people, but I appreciated it, or at least I learned to appreciate it. I learned to really listen to what they were saying and the heart behind it. To do that, I had learned to tune out the old echoes of fear and the guilt that had shouted at me for so long. I had other conversations too. Some people, like the father whose child was engaged to be married to one of my siblings, had told me they wanted to hear my side of the story. He told me that he didn't believe some of the things he's heard about Derek and me, and he wanted to listen. We talked for 3 months, and he said it helped him feel more confident about how he could support his child when they finally married into the Duggar family. Every time I find myself talking with someone, okay, let me go back. So the father of one of her sister-in-laws was concerned and had different talks with Jill. So Jill, who a lot of times has been labeled as this child who's been destructive and caused problems and was out of the umbrella and all these other things that we've heard and read in papers, still is supporting her family, still isn't speaking ill of them, because knowing what she knows and having that discussion with that father, he still felt okay with his child being part of the family. Interesting. Every time I find myself talking with someone who is curious about my family, especially when it's someone who shares an IBLP background, I ask myself some questions. How much truth can they handle? How much truth do they need? Do they actually seem genuinely interested in knowing more, or do they seem combative? That's very important because it matters. Will my conversation be beneficial for them in trying to help them figure things out? Growing up Duggar, there are so many things that I'm grateful for. We had space and freedom and parents who were patient and kind. She gives so much grace to her parents, man. I read a comment once that criticized mom and pops for using their kids as child labor to build their house. That couldn't be further from the truth. I love being taught how to use a drill or how to lay tile and then being given the trust to go ahead and get on with the job. Mom and pops didn't treat us as slaves when we were building the big house. They treated us as co-workers, worthy of respect and praise. I don't know how much I agree with that. Not the problem. I don't have a problem with them helping out. But I wouldn't say that they treated you all as co-workers when you're getting letters from your parents telling you, or from your father telling you all the various charges that you accumulated in an 8-year period. I don't see that. And when the job was finished and we got to move in, all of us who were old enough to walk, talk, and at the very least hold a paintbrush could point to parts of the home and say, I did that. It gave us a sense of purpose and created with us an even deeper bond that held us together. This is a picture of Jilly Muffin in December of 1995. I am grateful for the way mom and pops taught us how to treat each other. When you have that many kids living and learning together under one roof, you can't be a micromanager, refereeing all their arguments and disagreements. You have to teach them how to get along. And mom in particular was so good at that. She was always encouraging us to think about what the other person was feeling, to empathize and see things from their perspective. I get what she's saying, but did that come into play when her and her sisters were assaulted? Because it seems like they only practiced this during certain times. And one of the greatest compliments you could ever give Pops was to tell him that you were impressed by how well we all got along. They're best friends, he'd say, his eyes dancing with delight. And he was right. We didn't see the little ones as annoying, and we weren't fighting for our parents' attention. We loved each other, and we knew that we were all loved in return. Mom and Pops made time for us individually as well. Whenever either one of them was running an errand, they'd take one or two of us along for the ride. We'd often get $1 to spend in whatever store we were visiting, and they both would make us feel special. We were never in any doubt about the fact that their marriage was their priority, but it was just as clear that they both loved every one of us. For all the times growing up that I heard the phrase, children are a blessing, I never once doubted it. Mom and Pops lived it out loud. They loved us, and they never ceased to take an opportunity to show us that love in action. I guess things change with the show, but it's not difficult for me to look back on those days with gratitude. Thanks to the show, we ate well, lived in beautifully furnished houses, traveled the world, and got to feel like we had a sense of purpose and calling as we dedicated ourselves to the ministry. It's one thing to give a kid a drill and show them how to put rivets in a partition wall, but it's a whole nother level for a kid to have those parents invite them to share the God-given task of telling the world about how great it is to grow up in a Christian home. So yes, I am grateful, but I am also realistic. There is much that I can look back on and smile, but I picked up some wounds along the way. It's like roses and thorns, justice and grace. You can recognize the beauty and happy parts of your story while also recognizing the more difficult parts. Two can coexist. The highs aren't automatically erased or invalidated by the lows. This is a picture of Jill, John, and her sister when they were little. Ray must have been able to see it the moment we sat down to talk with him. We'd originally gone to him with a plan to restart the mediation process with Mom and Pops, but Ray gently helped us to see that the last thing we needed was a quick fix. I think this is Muskogee, Muscogee Creek, he said, midway through our first session. So I'm going to talk about arrows. Okay, we said, not really knowing what else to say. You've been in battle for a long time. You've taken a lot of arrows, and there are more coming. Occasionally, back in the day, when someone would get shot with an arrow, the arrowhead might get lost inside them. And anytime that area got bumped, it would be extremely painful. You've got a lot of different wounds on you. Some are old, some are new. And I don't think many of those wounds have healed right. The room stopped. My breath grew shallow. Cry or run, I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I just sat and I listened. That's why it hurts so bad so much of the time, Jill. Even when people do the slightest thing, maybe Derek says or does something dumb, but it bumps one of those arrowheads and triggers all that old pain. So no, you don't need a mediation meeting with your parents right now. You don't need to go back into battle. You need to heal. Really heal. It took years for us to put the puzzle pieces together, years for us to start to identify the reasons why things felt like they did. It took a lot of talking with Mr. McIntosh, a lot of talking with each other, and a lot of getting things wrong more often than we got things right. We had to learn how to talk to each other, becoming attuned. And I, in particular, had to learn how to trust people. Decades of fear and paranoia didn't unravel overnight, which they wouldn't. When you have parents telling you to suppress your feelings, when you have parents who know that you've been assaulted and they're not allowing you to get some of the necessary help and therapy that you need, it's wound after wound after wound after wound, which is why he's saying, like, you have those wounds on your body that never quite healed. That's to say like you have an arrow stuck in you. Wow. That's the way to put it. Things like Josh's trial and my deposition were tough, sending me spiraling back into the panic and the fear. At times, even today, there are periods where it feels like the old pressures come at me in waves, and I have to work hard to keep the weight off my shoulders. But slowly, gradually, we have started to find a route away from the pain. The wounds are still there, but the scar tissue is growing thicker. In the same way that we thought that mediation was going to be our way to the finish line with mom and pops, I'd hoped that the lawsuit against the city of Springdale, Arkansas, Washington County, Arkansas, Kathy O'Kelly, Ernest Kate, Rick Hoyt, In Touch Magazine and its parent company, and anyone else involved behind the scenes would bring closure and healing to that most painful part of my life. It won't. It didn't. At least not in the way that I'd hoped. Right from the beginning, we knew the law was on our side, but what started out as a winnable case, so winnable that the law firm took it on contingency, putting millions of dollars into litigation that spanned 5 years, suddenly became weak once my brother appeared in court. Our case was derailed by everything that happened with Josh. The fact that we were due to appear in the same court before the same judge, likely with drawers drawn from the same jury pool, meant that we were tied to him. It was another painful twist of the knife to be linked to our abuser like this, but there was nothing we could do. After Josh's trial revealed the continued secrecy in our family and the lack of acknowledgement of wrongdoing, the judge and everyone around grew skeptical of anything to do with the Duggars. They lumped us all together, and despite the fact that our case was strong, we could feel the tide turning against us, even though we were suing those who the judge agreed had illegally released the reports of our abuse and then exploited us as victims of child sexual abuse. In many people's eyes, the court had already declared who the culprit was, the real culprit, Josh. Wow, that sucks. In February 2022, my phone pinged a local news alert as I simultaneously received media requests for comment. You know what bothers me about that whole thing is if her father had given them the money that he obviously had to get legal counsel after the whole thing happened in the first place, then they would have had time to be able to hold those other people accountable for what they did. But once again, because of JB, Jim Bob, the father of all fathers, they didn't get what they deserved. The judge had dismissed our case. When the judge released his opinion, he made it crystal clear that the graphic reports of child sexual abuse victims were illegally released. He wrote that what the defendants did was profoundly wrong, and that if the question is whether defendants were ignorant of the law or grossly negligent in its application, the answer is absolutely. He went on to say that Arkansas Freedom of Information Act is not all inclusive, and that in our case, all individual defendants were seemingly ignorant of the privacy rights Arkansas affords to sexual assault victims and to the families that are identified as in need of services. Those are in quotes. He further stated that, in quotes, neither report should have been released, end quotes, due to the clear, in quotes, and I say this word wrong, unambiguous, end quotes, laws the officials broke. AR Code 16-90-1104B and the Child Maltreatment Act, ARC Code, and 12-18-104A. But even though I felt somewhat vindicated since the judge recognized that the reports had been illegally released and that none of this should have ever happened, it still was a month's consolation. The officials were granted immunity because of their status. The lasting personal damage had been done. I had been identified and re-traumatized. She says it once, but let me say, and re-traumatized and re-traumatized and re-traumatized, because this was a thing where they released it. After they released it, she got traumatized by the paparazzi. She got traumatized by her parents. She had to do that interview on national television for her parents with the abuser sitting right there. She got re-traumatized every single time that she was forced to interact with him in happy family outings. Every time that he redid or reoffended, just trauma after trauma after trauma after trauma. And some of that is on her parents. And a lot of it is on her brother. And some of it are on those officials that she mentioned. I had been identified and re-traumatized, had sought legal recourse, but was now collateral damage in a seemingly unchecked system. And the thought of making more appeals wasn't much good either, because we'd only get tied up with the ongoing circus and the court proceedings currently surrounding Josh. We had lost. It was all over. Some people were supportive. Others said we were blaming the wrong people, that it was mom and pop's fault. I can feel another wave of anxiety and fear about to wash over me, but I held tight to some of the most powerful advice that Mr. McIntosh had given Derek and me. This is in quotes. Sometimes you have to be okay with other people not being okay with you. And you have to be okay with you not being okay too. End quotes. I had always struggled in that area. I grew up believing subconsciously that whenever there was any bad feeling, it was up to me to do what I could to fix it. It worked when my world began and ended with the big house, but not anymore. There was just no way of changing the way that millions of people saw me. If they disapproved and didn't like what I'd done, I had to be okay with that. With time, I was able to see that even though our lawsuit was thrown out, our fight for justice had left a positive legacy for us both. It was what drove Derek to enroll in law school and what inspired him to take on his first job after graduation as an assistant district attorney in Oklahoma. Today, he is able to fight for victims' rights in ways that neither of us were able to do before. Every week, he strives to protect victims from being blamed, shamed, and bullied into silence. Go, Derek. Only now can I look back and see things clearly, like the way IBLP fostered a culture of manipulation and abuse. The fact that Pops eventually put the show above his children, or the toll it took on my own mental health. I also see Mom more clearly today. Really? I see the myriad of ways that she cared for us when we were growing up, the sacrifices that she made, and the depth of love for her people. I love her, respect her, and look up to her. It's interesting that she doesn't blame her mom for any of this. I wonder if that's an easy way for her to adapt, or if she really believes that her mom played no part. Because I believe that her mother played a part in this as well. Her mother had to sign things too. She's the first person I call whenever I have a question about our baby's health. And I love that when we still connect that way, no matter what family is. I love that we can still connect that way, no matter what the family drama that is occurring. But I miss her too. I miss the ease of communication we used to have. I miss it so much that there are times I almost wonder if it would be better to go back to the way things were when Derek and I were happy to fall into line and silence our questions. Wouldn't it be good to be free from all this struggle and heartache? Is ignorance really bliss? I know the answer is no, just like I know that I must at times sacrifice a degree of closeness in my relationship with mom. Exactly. You love your mom, but you have to protect yourself from her too. And I also know that anytime I want to get together, there's a chance emotions will get stirred up again. It's all part of the cost that we count these days. And I pray this trouble season won't last. I believe there are better days ahead. I remember Pops clearly too. My dad always had a great capacity for love and for fun. And though he wasn't quite as emotionally in tune as Mom, he was still very caring, and I could still have deep conversations way into my teens. I never doubted that he loved us kids, and never doubted that he loved Mom either. He would often tell my mom not to worry about keeping everything looking just perfect at home. To him, what mattered most was that us children got what we needed, and Mom was able to take good care of us. Pops made life fun. He could transform a family bike ride or a night spent camping out in the front yard into a real adventure. He was there for us, and even when he was still picking up a zillion popsicle wrappers that we left in the yard on a summer day and threatening to ban us from having popsicles for a while, we knew he wouldn't be too hard on us. He struck a good balance. He wanted us to have fun, and he made sure we did. I loved him and still do. It's just that the show and time seem to have changed things. Getting out cost us, but it was worth it. It was worth it to find freedom from the guilt and the fear. It was worth it to learn how to think for myself about what I really believed about everything from God and the Bible to how many kids we should have and how they should be educated. It was worth it to discover that standing up for myself or others isn't a sin or act of disobedience. It's a mark of freedom, of self-respect, of dignity. And learning to treat myself more kindly, I am discovering that it's possible to do the same for others as well. In May 2022, not long after Josh had been sentenced to serve 12 and a half years in prison, I let myself start to think about the upcoming birth. The little one that had been growing inside me since November wasn't so little anymore. And at first, my mind returned to my previous labors and deliveries with Israel and Samuel. I knew it would be different and hopefully less stressful this time with a slightly early planned C-section, but there were still so many unknowns. Memories of the pain, the fear, the risk were still fresh, but I did not want to let them take hold of me. I wanted to spend my final weeks of pregnancy looking forward, not back. We were at home when I asked Derek the question that had been brewing within me for a few days. How do you feel about my mom being at the birth? Maybe she could help out when I get home as well? Derek smiled. That would be good. She's been at the others. My next question came before I could help it. What about Pops? I don't know. Do we want him to meet our baby here? Would a neutral location be better? We left the discussion about Pops for another day, but never really got around to it. When I started dilating and had to have the baby before my scheduled C-section date, Mom came straight over. She was great, as any woman would be who has given birth more than 19 times, including losses, and has been present at births of most of her 30-plus grandchildren. Kathy and my friend Sierra came to wait with the boys, and in spite of the regular but slightly earlier than planned C-section and the background fear that my uterus might rupture again, I was able to exhale just a little, knowing that my family was there with me. There were no cameras, but I was still a Duggar. Frederick, Freddie Diller, came into this world without a shout, and my uterus held up just fine. He had to spend a few days in the NICU since he was a bit early, but there was nothing that anybody was worried about. When he was finally ready to come home, Mom rode in the car with me and Freddie. She'd been amazing all through the delivery as well as after it, helping me with the baby, night feedings, and tending to my every need as I recovered from the C-section. That girl at this point has had 3 C-sections. That is a lot. We were able to connect in ways we'd not connected for years, and I was grateful for this unexpected gift. When we got back to our house, Mom checked her phone. "It's Pop," she said. "He's gonna come get me." Her voice trailed off. She looked concerned. I glanced at Derek. He looked at me. We both knew the answer to the question that Mom hadn't asked. "Okay," I said. "You should tell Pops to come inside so he can meet Freddie," said Derek warmly. When Pops arrived a half hour later, he looked around slowly, like he was taking it all in. We moved houses a month earlier, and this was his first time over. He'd never been to our previous place either, and we lived there for 3 years, so this was all new to him. He looked content, but like he was quickly having to redraw a map of how Derek and I lived. I needed to redraw my map too. In previous years, I'd seen him a few times at family events, weddings, funerals, court cases, but never somewhere this quiet, this private. He looked different, a little older perhaps. The way he carried himself, there wasn't the same sense of authority and power that he once had. I am sure that losing that show really brought him back down to reality. And I am sure that some of what she saw was the fact that, yeah, he really this is y'all's kind of last chance to get it right with these people. Maybe. As soon as Pop saw baby Freddie, his expression changed. His eyes found their old sparkle. His smile fired up again. Of all the many different parts to him, head of the Duggar household, CEO of Mad Family Inc., politician, public figure, it was plain old Grandpa Duggar who I found the easiest to love. There was nothing complex there, nothing to worry about, just a man taking delight in the precious baby that his daughter had just brought into the world. For a long time, we all just stood and smiled, Pops looking at Freddie, us looking at Pops. "Jill, Derek," Mom said eventually, would y'all mind if Pops held Freddie?" "Sure," I said. "We should get a photo too." So this is a picture of Jim, Bob, and Michelle with baby Freddie in July. And that is how she ended it. Now let's read the author's note. What this book is not. This book is not a letter to my family as part of the reconciliation process. I also didn't write this book to shame my family or just to try and get their attention. We will continue to work through what matters with family independent of this book with the desired ultimate goal of healthy relationship, Lord willing. We understand that no family is perfect and that you can recognize the beauty in your story while still acknowledging the difficult parts and even setting boundaries. It shouldn't make you unloving. It's like roses and thorns. The two can coexist, and I do love my family. The highs are invalidated by the lows and vice versa. Everyone's story will look different. Just because some problems weren't intentional or one story isn't as bad as the next person's shouldn't invalidate the real problems or minimize the story. And the degree to which we felt this book needed to be written was the degree to which we felt like voices were still being silenced and real harm was continuing to be done by not telling it. Good job. Good job. There's some acknowledgments in here. Y'all can log off now if you want to. I'm just going to read it for the sake of reading it. For those of you who log off now, thank you so much. Please like the video. Please comment below. Let me know what you thought of it. And please subscribe if you haven't done so already. The book series are going to continue. I do believe that this is something that I'm not going to stop because, as I've said before, I enjoy reading books, and why not, stumble and read them up here. So let's get to the acknowledgments. Speak truth, even if your voice shakes. Source unknown. Like the Old Testament story of the support provided to Moses by Aaron and Hur when they helped hold his arms up to ensure a successful battle for Israel. I think I pronounced that wrong. I have felt so supported in many ways on this book writing journey. I want to thank our pastor, friends, and family who have supported us either quietly or openly as we have lived our story and then started the process to tell it in book form. I'm grateful to our agent, Anthony, and his team at Creative Arts Agency who believed in us and have been super helpful in walking us through the whole book process. Thanks also to the amazing team at Gallery Books and Simon, Natasha, Mia, Lauren, and Anna. Photographer Christopher Patty and his assistant Jack were so gracious to come to our home and shoot around our toy-scattered living room, allowing for frequent breaks to care for our baby. Thanks to my sweet friend and owner of Blonde Salon, Michelle, who came to do my hair and makeup on cover shoot day, but was also totally there to support me and jumped in to help with the baby too. A huge thanks to our writer, Craig, from the time we received his bio to when he crossed the pond from Britain to help us start this process. Our trust and confidence in him only grew. He did a great job. This was good. He embodies what it means to walk a mile in someone's shoes as he used his therapist-like gift of listening for hours and days and then compiled and helped us put our often complicated story into words. His own life experiences and previous work only added to the care and attention he showed us in the more sensitive parts of our story. We couldn't be more grateful for Craig. The Yorkshire tea, curly, and help with getting the London accent right were added bonuses. We are also thankful for our therapist, Mr. Raymond McIntosh, who for countless hours has helped us process the highs and lows of our story. Like a guide, Mr. McIntosh gave us so many tools we didn't know we needed when we needed them most. He pointed us back to Jesus and helped us find our voice. We are forever grateful for his help and his support. He was the answer to our prayers. Everyone needs a therapist like Mr. McIntosh. Our sons, Israel, Samuel, and Frederick, who gave us some of the most greatest motivation to keep going. My husband, Derek Dillard, who has walked through the fire and every therapy session with me and been my greatest support, advocate, and coffee and sushi supplier. Babe, without you, I wouldn't have found the strength to face my giants, count the cost, or find my voice. It's been a journey, but there's nobody I'd rather live with than you. ILYSM. I think that's I love you so much. My Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, who I owe my life to, has sustained us through it all and whose promises to never leave us or forsake us through the rest of our journey. And that is the end. You guys, for those of you who stuck around, this was really, really a good book. We saw the front cover, and for those of you who, didn't notice because I cut it off in the graphic. So that's that. And then inside there's this beautiful picture of them as well. I feel like I've grown to have a newfound respect for this couple and Derek. I did like him when I saw him on the show, but it takes a really strong person to support their wife the way that he does and did. It seems to me like there are many times where he wanted to say something, but out of respect for her and to not completely damage what she wanted in terms of still being able to be involved with her family, he held back. You all let me know down below how you felt about this book. If you've been here for all three, let me know which one of the three, the Browns, Love Times 3 with the Dargers, or Counting the Cost with Jill and her husband. Which of those three books have you enjoyed the most? As I said before, thank you so much for joining me, and until next time.